Great at the microphone, as always, Alice, and this is a new retelling. The name of today's project is I Became the Leader of Primitive Hunters. You can read it, as always, on the Remanga. I will leave a link to the project and the name in the description. There you will also find my Telegram channel. Join it so as not to miss news related to channel, and now sit back and enjoy watching chapter 1. Subai was a simple writer. A young guy in his 20s, he was used to lying on his bed writing his books and playing console games, and unlike active activities, he preferred to sit at home. The young man was thin and not very big endurance. The expedition took place in the mountains, and Git led a group of people forward and convinced them that the destination was already very close. Small children about 10 years old walked ahead, several more people followed them, and at the end of the column was our Subai. Everyone pushed him because he was slowing down with all his might. Still sweated like snowdrifts and saw how he was pushed as children laughed at him, saying that he was the weakest adult they had ever seen. Even his editor made fun of him, saying that even girls from elementary school could do better. Subai began to get angry because he was just lying under the air conditioner, and the editor dragged him into the mountains. Of course, this was far outside his comfort zone. So now the writer decided that when he returned home, he would definitely take revenge on his editor and force him to reread his drafts. His leg slipped, he failed to grab onto anything, and he fell. It was really his end the moment he fell. He realized that it was better to look at life more realistically than to dream of power in another world. He also realized that he should not be distracted by anything else when he works during his fall, which now could cost him his life. He learned a lot, but what will he do now that his life is over? When Subai came to his senses, his whole body ached and ached because of the injuries he received. Because the rock was a huge height that no one knew, he tried to open his eyes, remembering that he had fallen from a great height but did not understand what was happening because he was supposed to be dead, but he remained alive. When Subai was finally able to open his eyes, he discovered that he was tied up. But why? Suddenly a drop of some slimy and thick liquid fell on his face, that it was saliva. Fully opening his eyes, Subai saw a girl completely unknown to him. She looked at him and literally slobbered. The guy was afraid that she was going to eat him, but he still tried to restrain himself. She was human and people don't eat each other, right? Suddenly the girl pulled out something like a sword, said something in an incomprehensible language, and then noticed how tender the Subai meat was. She opened her mouth showing her fangs. The girl described out loud how juicy the meat would be if cooked correctly. By the way, guys, the other day I found a cool Discord server on which I had a great time. It's called Horon. If you are lonely and want to find a pleasant company to communicate and have a good time, join the Discord Horizon. I will also sit there from time to time. I will leave the link in the description. And again, an incomprehensible phrase. She began to poke it as if anticipating being dinner. It looks like a young guy is waiting for a roll. He began to cry and scream, regretting that the heavens made him suffer without allowing him to die. Fell from a cliff. The girl raised her sword and was ready to point it at the guy. He was preparing to say the last word, but suddenly this sword did not cut him, but only the rope that tied his hands. Subai was surprised, not understanding what was happening. The girl uttered a phrase and again in an incomprehensible language said that she wanted to eat, but she was not going to eat the person. She turned and left, and when she turned her back to him, he noticed something strange. She had ears like a cat and a tail that began below the belt. Finding himself in another world, Subai realized that perhaps something incredible was waiting for him, but he decided to remain calm and find out more about the place in which he found himself. He looked around and realized that he was lying on something soft, like hay, and there were some bones nearby. Animal further away there was something like a fire. Surrounded by stones, it looked quite old. Mono. He approached the place where the sun was shining brighter, and when he looked into the distance he saw that people were dressed very strangely. They wore leaves and animal skins instead of ordinary modern clothes. It seemed to him that he was in a primitive society, and constantly the speech of these people in their own language before they switched to something incomprehensible to him confirmed this theory. Suddenly a huge man appeared next to him. On his head there was a hat with a horn and his ears hung down to the side. Some kind of amulet hung on his chest on which apparently there were teeth of large animals which he killed. The dress barely covered his inflated body. The man asked his name. Where did he come from and why did he come to the village of Yen Long? A girl, his daughter, approached him, and although the man told her to call him captain in front of strangers, not dad, she continued to call him dad. they began to talk in their own language, which naturally Subai did not understand. The theory about primitive society was no longer a theory, but a fact. It was obvious that both were turning to the young man, because his silence seemed strange to them. The captain and his daughter were arguing where he came from. Guy, they believed that he came from a big village because he was too soft and gentle. They said that the shaman wanted to see him, and finally they led Subai to the largest tent. Everyone in the settlement gathered around them and said something. Following them as they walked, the writer wondered where he ended up, because everywhere he looked there were tails and horns. He heard that the villagers of Yanglong admired the young man because he had no wings, horns of a tail and muscles on his body. They thought it was very unusual. Yes, indeed, it is some kind of primitive society, except that it seems this is not his home country. But since he is a writer, he decided to accept his fate from a philosophical point of view. Falling from an eyebrow was certainly a boring way to die, but this was a rare case. All that remains is to figure out what to do next. Subai decided that under no circumstances there is no need to panic. He should carefully observe everything that is happening. Unfortunately, there seemed to be no way to salvation. He noticed that there were a lot of animal bones around, and it seemed that they were looking at him more from a scientific rather than a gastronomic point of view. They even allowed him to sleep. Fortunately for our hero, all these people around him turned out young man's chest, and there, like the captain's, his teeth were hanging on a rope. It turned out that the girl's name was January. She would watch Subai, and if he had there will be questions, he can easily turn to her. Of course, the first thing he did was ask Jan to tell him more about the tribe. The tribe is called, as we already know, Yang, and the totem sounds the same. Although the girl could not describe it, he assured that the time would come and he himself would find out that it was a shaman, the strongest in the tribe. The inhabitants cannot survive without him. A little lower in the hierarchy, his name is Yanko, and he is the father of Yant, followed by the leaders of the hunters, who also has a totem. Then the reservists are ordinary soldiers and ordinary people. Previously, much more people lived here. The village stood on fertile land left behind by their hide and seek. There was a lot of food and water in the village. There were 300 people, of them 65 soldiers, but 6 months ago they were attacked by the Black Snake tribe. They ruined the hunting ground at Gautier, and unfortunately many died, and even worse, they lost their land, so they had to move to where they are now, January. With tears in her eyes and determination in them, she said that she must definitely become stronger in order to save her comrades who are now in captivity, to return their lands and avenge everyone who died. They walked for several hours in the vicinity of the village of Yalong. Subai looked at nature and the situation of the tribe. After a walk, he understood how things were. The situation could not get worse. Almost all the inhabitants were thin and pale, and they clearly did not have enough food. The weather conditions, combined with the lack of hygienic conditions, created an ideal environment for the spread of bacteria. If an epidemic began, the consequences would be terrible and many would simply die. It was a dead-end situation. He is the future shaman of this tribe, but he does not understand how to be a shaman. He does not even know where to start. The guy holds his head in his hands. Beep. Loading the auxiliary system. 10%, 30%, 70% daily activation of the auxiliary system has been successfully completed. What kind of system, of course, is the system? This is a writer. He has a system in his head that he came up with back when he lived in his time and dreamed of a different life. He began to try to control it with the power of thought. The young man found out that he must turn on every day to receive random sets of promises. For each mark there is 1% chance to get an average set and 0.1% chance to get an advanced set. The monthly tag is guaranteed to give an average set, and the yearly tag is an advanced set, but not that many other auxiliary sets will open after the first year. The system is visible only to the owner. Others do not have access to it. Here again Ian Hua started screaming why Subai didn't listen to her, because she was telling him about the tribe and could train him at the same time so as not to arouse suspicion. The writer complains that he is a little dizzy, and without even allowing him to continue, the girl took him into one of the chambers that somehow resembled Indian summer hut. Probably that's what they called it. On the floor there was a rustle on something soft, but the girl sat down on a hard surface just on the ground. Realizing what it was now his place of residence, Subai fell on the so-called bed because he was too tired, but the girl was afraid that he was going to lie down but was silent. A little later Subai noticed a strange but pleasant smell slightly reminiscent of milk. Yang Hua rushed to him and stopped him so that he would not touch anything because this is the place where he sleeps. Lova third. The situation became a little tense. Inhua allowed Subai to stay at her house, which meant that they will now live together. Of course the guy knew that the girl had horns and a tail, but her body and face looked pretty good. Of course he agreed. Yang Hua had to go on patrol tonight, so she turned and left, warning him not to touch her things otherwise he would get hit on the head. Of course Subai, like any other writer, pointed out that even though the girl looked mature, she was so easily embarrassed. After Yang Hua left, he decided to continue working the system. He logged in and began to wait for his reward. The guy received the average set of level 1 support. He received the average set immediately, but I realized that it was just a guaranteed reward. For the first mark and failure, it was written that the level of this ability is level 1, so it can be improved. The level of the ability will increase when the scale of proficiency with the ability is filled. To check the proficiency of the ability, it was necessary to open the character panel, which Subai did. After looking at his characteristics, he realized that they were far from average. Not to mention the ideal endurance, strength, speed, all this was below 1. The writer realized that such characteristics were insufficient for survival in this cruel world, so he decided that he needed to take care of himself. In the main tent, a conversation was held between the shaman and the leader. The old man put something like a fong, beautifully painted in white, red and green colors, to his palm. The conversation was about Subai. The leader talked about how they don't know where Subai came from. Can he become a shaman? Maybe he came from the Black Snake tribe. The old man realized that they had no time left. No one from the tribe had magic except this guy. He coughed, covering his mouth with his hand, and saw blood on it. The captain asked the shaman to pay more attention to his health, but the elder understood that no matter what he did, he had no more than a couple of days left. Of course Vok blamed himself for the fact that if he had been stronger, the old man would have been safe and would not have suffered during the raid of the Black Snake tribe. However, the shaman was not angry with Yanka for this. He paid attention to other things when Vok looked into the soul of the young man. He saw that there was no malice in that soul. It was pure like rainwater that had not yet touched the earth. The shaman suggested that perhaps a young man from a legendary tribe, and he promised the leader to protect him until he decided to do evil. The ceremony was supposed to begin a few days later, and when he left to prepare to her, the elder hinted that the descendants of shamans often inherit their abilities, and it would be better if the shaman had children. And better yet, more. The captain said that he would do everything possible. When the captain left the tent, he noticed his daughter, who listened but did not dare to admit it, saying that she was on patrol and accidentally passed by and didn't hear anything. However, now the father was no longer worried. Lolly heard his daughter. He had a very important assignment for her. The girl was happy, thinking that he had finally recognized her strength. However, this turned out to be far from the case. He told her to become the wife of a young shaman and to give birth to children. Of course, this was news for Yanju, but she took this information calmly because she had already discussed with her father several times that she would only marry someone who would be stronger than her. However, the Subai was skinny. Her father decided to kill the girl, who was 19 years old, and at her age she should have given birth to children and serve the tribe, but the girl did not give up. She didn't care about the children. It was important for her to become stronger and take revenge for the tribe as soon as possible. She expressed her opinion and ran away. Her father ran after her to punish her for this behavior. At that time, the shaman, having heard the entire conversation between the captain and his daughter, realized that there was still a lot of strength in the young people. He was so interested in what would come of it, but he would still do everything to ensure the future of the tribe, and took 2 already sparkling fangs into his hands in front of her. Chapter for the next morning, Subai woke up from a terrible cold. He almost managed to freeze. January returned, and when she looked at the shaman, the picture of a family and children in front of her stopped, but she immediately drove away these thoughts and shouted that she wanted a larger man. She hit the young man hard in the face, but he didn't understand anything and just said that he needed straw to seal the holes through which the cold penetrates. Probably it was a figment of the writer's imagination, but perhaps Yank actually behaved much worse. The girl agreed to help the guy and took him in search of straw. The shaman saw the sleeping on the street of people who didn't even have anything to hide with. the leader's daughter explained that many don't have their own home and the skins are very valuable, so everyone takes care of themselves, but the value of the subai turned out to be higher when they found the straw. She bent over to those people whom she had seen before and shared with them with all the straw. All the attempts of Yan Hua to say that it was useless because his life is more important. Then the lives of these people ended in failure. The guy said that their lives are as valuable as his. These words made the girl look at the young man differently because he did not turn out to be an __, how she first imagined him at the guard post. They shouted that the hunters had returned, they had brought the prey, a lot of food for the settlement. One of the prey was a hungry boar with its throat cut. It looked appetizing. Subai noticed that he had had it for 24 hours, he asked how the food was divided among all the inhabitants. The girl replied that when it comes to meat, most of it goes to totem warriors, the rest is for children and reserve warriors. And the elders usually eat wild fruits if they find something. Well, the continuation will be released on my boost. Also in the next part there will be 18+ art, so post the video on YouTube. I just physically can't let the uncensored version come out. Therefore, if you want to see how GG will have sex with this cat girl, subscribe to Boost, the link to it will be in the description and Alice was at the microphone. We'll hear soon, bye bye.